Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we're bringing you a highly practical, deeply engaging guide to the global electric vehicle revolution. We're going to break down some truly fascinating data to show you exactly why the electric vehicle you might buy in the next decade, and, crucially, what it's going to cost you, depends almost entirely on where you live. We've got a ton of incredible insights lined up for you, so let's get right to it. It's a question we hear constantly, right? I mean, if you just read the headlines, you'd probably think there's this single universal global race toward one universal electric car. But honestly, that's a total myth. What does this transition really mean for your daily commute, your wallet, and your local power grid? Well, the reality is that the shift away from fossil fuels isn't just about swapping out the engine in our cars. It's literally the most significant industrial reconfiguration of the 21st century, and it's playing out very, very differently depending on where you look on the map. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll unpack the fundamental divide in the EV transition. Then we'll explore Europe's high-tech approach, followed closely by India's really fascinating focus on scale and micromobility. After that, we'll tackle the massive shared supply chain challenge both of these regions are facing, peek into the post-lithium future, and finally wrap things up with a strategic outlook for 2036. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. The EV transition divide, focusing on divergent policy frameworks. To make sense of the cars actually hitting the road, we first have to understand the rule books being written by governments. Because, at the end of the day, these distinct policy frameworks are exactly what dictate the billions being invested by massive automakers. Think of it like two completely different rule books. On one side, we have the European Union's top-down Green Deal. Their approach is highly regulatory, mandated by a hard stop, a total ban on new internal combustion engine sales by 2035. They're using carbon pricing and aligning energy taxation directly with climate goals. Now, flip over to India, and the strategy is fundamentally different. Driven by the Make in India initiative and the PM eDrive program, India is handing out massive fiscal discounts through production-linked incentives. They aren't just trying to clean up their transport sector. They genuinely want to build a self-sustaining, autonomous global manufacturing hub from the ground up. Let's look a little closer at the first side of this divide. Section 2, Europe's high-tech approach, or what we're calling the European mosaic. In Europe, the focus is squarely on high-margin, software-defined vehicles. They're basically building an ecosystem for premium consumers who demand long range, supported by a massive rollout of ultra-fast charging infrastructure. But here's the thing, the adoption is anything but uniform. We kind of tend to view Europe as this one giant monolithic market, right? But the data reveals a deeply fragmented mosaic. Just look at Norway at the top, a staggering 95% battery electric vehicle penetration. That's mostly driven by totally removing taxes on EVs, with the Tesla Model Y absolutely dominating. Then you have the economic engines of Europe, Germany, France, and the UK, sitting somewhere between 35 and 41%, utilizing structural subsidies and building local gigafactories. But move down to Italy, and you see a much slower recovery phase at just 19% penetration, heavily focused on corporate fleets and micro-EVs like the Leapmotor T03. And in Eastern markets like Romania, it's all about entry-level price parity, championed by affordable cars like the Dacia Spring. To maintain this high-tech market, European policymakers are leaning into a strategy termed selective protectionism. Rather than using traditional simple tariffs, they're actually using environmental standards as a shield. France is a textbook example of this. They've linked vehicle purchase incentives directly to the carbon footprint of the manufacturing process itself. So it acts as this highly sophisticated non-tariff barrier against cars produced in countries that rely heavily on coal-powered manufacturing. It's a really clever way to protect local European industry while simultaneously pushing a green agenda. Let's move on and see how this builds into an entirely different ecosystem. Section 3, India's scale and micromobility, the new production hub. Here, the electric revolution is practically leapfrogging the traditional private car ownership model altogether. 14. This number is absolutely staggering. That is the multiple by which India's domestic electric vehicle production has increased since 2020. A 14 times increase in just a few short years. No way is this an accident. It's the direct intended result of India's aggressive production-linked incentive, or PLI program, which basically rewards local manufacturing with giant financial offsets. Now, when we look at the Indian market itself, the passenger EV share is actually relatively small, sitting around 3.5%. But within that space, models like the Tata Punch EV and the Mahindra 9S are absolutely crushing it. Why? Because they're compact, they're purpose-built for incredibly dense urban traffic, and most importantly, they hit a highly affordable sub €15,000 price point. But you know what? The real story of Indian mass electrification isn't cars at all. It is the massive shift happening in two- and three-wheelers, which are the true backbone of their urban transit. And this brilliantly illustrates how India is solving a major local challenge. Because of the sheer density of Indian cities and the fragility of the local power grids, relying entirely on the European model of plug-in ultra-fast chargers just isn't feasible. It wouldn't work. Instead, they're prioritizing battery swapping for their commercial and micromobility fleets. Drivers can just exchange a depleted battery for a fully charged one in a matter of minutes. It completely bypasses those long charging wait times and, crucially, prevents massive simultaneous stress on the electrical grid. Which brings us to Section 4, breaking the battery monopoly, which is really a shared existential risk. Despite their totally opposing strategies, Europe and India share a massive geopolitical vulnerability. They both desperately need batteries, and right now they simply don't control the supply. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer scale of the monopoly we're dealing with. China currently controls a jaw-dropping 80% of the global battery supply chain and accounts for 60% of all global EV sales. For both European and Indian policymakers, this is a terrifying strategic choke point. The entire future of their domestic transport and energy security is currently reliant on an external actor. So how on earth do you fight back against that? Through aggressive supply chain insulation. The EU is pushing hard for a circular economy, mandating local lithium extraction and incredibly strict battery recycling so that these critical materials stay within their borders. India, meanwhile, is deploying those massive PLI tax discounts to force the localization of cell manufacturing, pairing it up with a sprawling rollout of 70,000 charging stations. Both regions are fiercely trying to de-risk this transition and ensure their institutional investments remain secure. To truly break free from this bottleneck, however, requires looking beyond current technology. Section 5, the post-lithium future, and the urgent need for diversifying energy. This right here is the race for technological R&D, a quest to secure sovereign economic survival for the long haul by diversifying the very chemistry of how we store power. Both Europe and India are pouring investments into alternative chemistries that leverage much more abundant, locally available materials. Sodium-ion batteries are a massive focus right now. They use incredibly abundant sodium, literally like salt, keeping costs extremely low, which is absolutely perfect for India's micromobility and Europe's entry-level cars. Then there's solid-state technology, which promises much higher energy density and unparalleled safety, making it the absolute holy grail for European luxury and performance segments. Finally, lithium-sulfur is emerging as the go-to for heavy transport, offering a fantastic energy-to-weight ratio. By shifting to these, nations can completely bypass the geopolitical instability tied directly to lithium and cobalt. But true resilience requires redundancy. You can't just rely on batteries alone. Europe is deliberately keeping the door open for e-fuels, these synthetic zero-emission fuels that allow them to preserve their rich heritage of internal combustion engine engineering, specifically for luxury and high-mileage segments. India, on the flip side, is leveraging its massive solar energy abundance to produce green hydrogen. This is their strategic play to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors like heavy trucking and industrial logistics, where lugging around huge heavy batteries just isn't practical. All right, we've seen the policies, the markets, and the tech. Now, let's cast our eyes down the road. Section 6, the 2036 Strategic Outlook and the Path to Parity. Both regions are staring down an incredibly ambitious target of 90% electrification over the next 10 years. But what does actual success look like? Here is the bottom line. The crucial point to understand is achieving price parity in a post-subsidy world. State aid just can't last forever. The real victory condition here is making electric vehicles natively cheaper than fossil fuel cars without the government footing the bill. This is actually already beginning to happen in specific luxury and fleet segments in the EU. And for India, thanks to the massive scale generated by their localized production, true mass market price parity is projected to hit somewhere between 2028 and 2030. Ultimately, the goal isn't just about reducing emissions. It's a high-stakes race for economic sovereignty. The true winners of 2036 will be the regions that can build completely autonomous, self-sustaining value chains from the raw materials dug out of the earth all the way to the smart grid. So, who's it going to be? Will it be Europe's high-tech circular model or India's incredible scale and micromobility? I want to warmly thank all of you focused learners for tuning into this explainer today. Your curiosity is exactly what drives this transition forward. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay fascinated by the mobility revolution. We'll see you next time.